Okay, in this video I'm going to show you how to run heat via a Docker container. So if you've used heat before and you used the app image, so the app image is available over here under releases on the GitHub page. That's plasma potential/heat. And you can just download the app image and run the app image as a single Linux executable file. And that's great, and there's a lot of flexibility in that, and it's easy. But if you want to get into actually doing heat development, you're going to need Docker. So Docker is basically the entire environment of heat shipped in a container, and then the user can download the source code and bind it into the container. Also, I want to preface this video by saying I apologize if you can hear my dog snoring. So I'm showing over here hub.docker.com/r/plasma potential/heat. And so this is where heat Docker container lives. We can see the different tags here. And so this is the v2.0.0 tag. And so if you wanted to pull that, you would just copy it right here, the command. And so if we open I guess the one thing I should say before I go to the terminal, there's instructions on how to get Docker. You need Docker and Docker Compose, FYI. And then you will need to download the heat Docker container and the heat source code. And once you have all that done, then you're in a place where you can start heat from Docker. So assuming that you have all of that stuff done, then we can proceed. So I'm going to change directories to where my on this machine is going to be a little different than yours. So go to wherever your heat GitHub source code is once you have the Docker container downloaded. So for me, the source code lives at source heat. And in this location, I have a bunch of different files, and I'm going to pull these over here. So if you downloaded from the GitHub page, let me show you here, back to the GitHub page, you have this folder Docker. Okay, so you're going to go in there. So I'm going to show you that in the terminal. So I'm going to, that directory is here. So here's the root GitHub page. If I cd into Docker, I can see that I have several different scripts in here, and those are identical to the scripts I'm going to go through right now. So there's a Docker file. This you probably won't need. This is for building the actual Docker container. There's some instructions. That's this Docker for heat. There's this build Docker script. This is basically a bash script that does that wraps around the Docker file and builds the actual Docker image. So you probably won't need that. What you're going to need is this docker compose.yml and then this run docker compose script. So I'm going to close all these other scripts to remove the clutter. So we're going to start with this docker compose YML. So it's a YML file, which is a recipe file. And basically we have the services, and there's only one service in this, and that's heat. And here's the image, plasma potential heat. And there's a bunch of things called out here. Ports 8050 and 8050, these are bound to each other. So you can change these so that you have the host port can be different. In the actual Docker script that builds the Docker file, or that builds the Docker container, 8050 is what's open. So you can bind any port on your local host to that. So we could change this to 7000 or something. But 8050 is usually pretty good on most operating systems, or on most for most firewalls. So in the volume section, we have a bunch of different volumes that I put in there for you. I'll talk about that in a second. But first, I'm going to breeze through that and just show you std and open, and then tty. So these both need to be true, and then we have some environment variables here that need to be set. So that's basically the whole Docker recipe. And then we have this run docker compose script, which is a bash script that we're going to use in Linux to actually start the Docker container. So this script will launch Docker Compose by doing either this, or if you comment this out, you can run it like this with this bottom line uncommented. And we'll talk about when you would do each of those in a second. But that will run this Docker Compose up, which will basically read this recipe file and build the container on the fly using the stuff in this recipe file. So the important things here, the really important thing is volumes. So you need to change this to match your own host. So by default, it comes from GitHub with this line uncommented. This is binding your home directory /heat to root /heat. So this is the data directory where all your heat results are going to be saved. So we need to bind from inside the container, which is what's on the right of the colon, to outside of the container. And so that's what we're doing in this line. And because everybody has a different home, I've just used the environment variable home to define that. But for most of these other things, you can't really do that. So like for this one, heat source code from GitHub. So this is where I have it on my machine, is home tom source heat GitHub source. But you probably have it in a different location. So you need to delete this out to everything to the left of the colon and put in the location where your heat source code is. And that's going to be the what you pulled, what you cloned down from GitHub. And then leave everything in all of these that's to the right of the colon just as they are, because these are specific paths in the container that need to be there in order for it to work. So if you have the heat source code, you can uncomment this. And if you have, and you'll definitely need to do that so that we can use this script. And then if you have the ORNL efit class from GitHub, you'll need to, if you want to edit that, you can uncomment this. Oops. You can uncomment this. But heat does come with a version, so you don't need to worry. If you're a Mafet developer, you can compile the binaries and the libs into a folder, and then you can link that folder directly into the container. You don't need to have the source code in there, just the bins and libs, the compiled binary. Same with OpenFoam. We compile OpenFoam. If you're an OpenFoam developer, you can compile into this folder. And same with the Swiss Army knife for OpenFoam. And then we have this batch mode directory. So if you're running heat in the terminal, which I'll talk about in a second, you would need this. And then down here in this environment, we are binding a environment variable. We're creating one inside of the container, which is basically this environment variable in our local host terminal session. So we're going to have to define this variable in the terminal, and then it's going to automatically be passed into the container when we're running the container. And that is what this run Docker Compose script does. It's because Docker containers are pretty nasty when it comes to how they write files. They write everything as root because they have root permission. So if you're running this on a computer that you don't have root access, that can be really difficult because you won't be able to get to any of your files after you write them, and you can also overwrite other files. So by using this bash script, we avoid that. So every user of heat who's going to be doing it from the Docker container needs to be added to the Docker group, right? So that's just a group add function, or if you're developing a new user, user mod-a-g, and then the group. But anyways, we pull that group ID for the Docker group, and we export it, and then we pull the user ID and we export it so that all the saves we do in the container will have your username and your Docker group. And then the final thing that happens in this script is we run Docker Compose. So Docker Compose up turns on the Docker container with the with all of these parameters we set up. So I'm going to go ahead and do this here. So so this is where we are. So I'm just going to run this run Docker Compose and see if it works here. So we can see that it figured out that the Docker group exists, and it sets up the environment variable, and then it sets up the UID, and then it launches heat. And so here we are inside of the container running heat. So we should be able to open a web browser and just browse to heat. And there you have it. So you can follow the tutorials for the app image on how to run an actual test case. If you wanted to do it from the GUI. So yeah, so that's how you would run it from the GUI. And now I'm going to show you, so if you Control C, it'll stop it, and it takes a minute. You can hit it again and it'll just send a kill switch. And so now I'm going to show you how to do it with terminal mode, right? So that's the latest version. In Heat version 2 Plus, we have terminal mode. So this file is going to stay the same, but we are going to change one thing. We're going to change this batch mode directory, right? And so I have this folder set up, at least I think I do. I should check, make sure I have that set up. Let me open a new window here. And let's go, where does it say it is? It's in heat test. So these are the lines we're uncommenting here. Heat test / terminal. Okay, so I have heat test / terminal. And in there I have this batch file. Let's have a look, see at this. Yes, this will work, I think. And we have two different machines in here. So I have files for D3D. I have files for NSTX. So whenever you're running in batch mode, the batch file has to be at the root where all these other directories are. And in here I have a 4, a 200, and all these files. And those are the files that I have here. So, okay, so this home / tom / terminal, this is the location where my batch file lives. So this is the root location of the batch directory. So I have subdirectories for each machine with all the corresponding files, and in that location I have the actual batch file .dat. So that is where that is. And we're going to bind that directory into the Docker container at /root / terminal. Okay, so we've uncommented this to run in interactive mode. Everything else stays the same. Or sorry, not in interactive mode, in terminal mode. Everything else stays the same. We're going to come over to the container, and instead of just running a Docker Compose up, we're going to actually open the Docker container and launch ourselves into a bash shell inside of it. And so you just uncomment this line. That's all you got to do. Save it, run the terminal, and it'll launch you in. Oops, you know what? I am doing this from the wrong location. This file that I just edited is at a different location. Let me just open the right file. I need to open GitHub, Docker. Where is it? We're going to need this one and this one. I'm going to open those two. I'm going to close these old ones because, yeah. Okay, so these files are the ones. So I need to go in and edit this. Again, source code needs to be uncommented, and then the terminal. If we're running in terminal mode, we need the terminal root directory to be uncommented in the recipe file, and then we're gonna comment that and uncomment this, and then we're gonna run it. So now it should launch me in, and you can see now I am a root user, and this is the container number. So I am inside of the container. You can see that there's a bunch of scripts and stuff. So the home directory in the Docker container is /root. So /root, oops, is the file we're in. So I'm going to change directories into that terminal directory that we bind mounted. Remember, this directory here is bind mounted to /root / terminal. So I'm now in /root, that's the home directory /terminal. I can look, and there's my batch file. So I can, see where am I, /root / terminal. Okay, great. I'm going to go up a level. All the heat source code is in source. So I'm going to go to source, heat, and you can see that I have all the files we need. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the Python 3 launch heat. Okay, and if we do that, we can do it with a H, --H, and it'll display this help menu and show you all the different switches you can use. What we're going to run with is Python 3. Which mode are we going to run? We're going to run in, you can run in T or G. G is for GUI mode. We're going to run in terminal mode, which is interactive mode. And then I'm going to run with a file, batch file path, and this is inside of our container path /root /terminal /batch file.dat. Okay. You should notice you can also do like an A and a P. So let's say we're on a LAN, a local area network. We could do like a 192.168.0.100 or whatever, and you could do like port, 80, 50, or whatever, 8,000, whatever. So you can edit that if you want, but we don't need to do that for this. So yeah, so we're gonna run this command, and this should run heat batch mode. Oh, it looks like I got it wrong. -F. It's -M. Mode is terminal. Heat run mode. Oh, I didn't put in. There we go. I didn't put in the actual name of the file. So again, it has to be Python 3. So the error I made was I just did that twice in a row. You need to do Python 3 launch heat.py -m t -f root terminal batch file.dat. So you can see it's running heat. I'm going to kill this because we don't need to run it. So yeah, again, the command was Python 3 launch heat. Mode is terminal. The batch file location is this. So if you've been running heat in the app image, you'll notice that there's a difference in this, that there's 2 dashes for the terminal mode. So yeah, so that is how you run heat in the app image, or sorry, in the Docker container. So it's a little more involved than the app image. The only other thing I wanted to mention is so here, this is I'm going to open a new terminal window. And remember that this one that's in white text is inside the container. This one in green text is on my local machine. I'm going to change directory to the, let's just go to the, let's go to this is probably the most useful, to the GitHub location. And go to the source code there. So this is the file. This is the source code on GitHub, and so if you downloaded the GitHub, if you cloned it, you'd be in this location. We just CD'd into source, okay? And so I'm just going to do something. I'm just going to touch a test file dot test, okay? Just to create a file. So now I just created this test file dot test, that didn't exist before. And this is on the local host, okay? This is not on inside the container. But remember, because we binded the source directory into the container, we should be able to go inside of the container and see that, if I can remember which terminal window I am. Yeah. So let's go and see if we can find that. So we're in the location, so let's look and see what the location was. It was /root /source /heat. That's where we are, /root /source /heat. So let's look, and there is test file dot test. And so we can create things, we can edit things in this. So we can even open that file right now. Let's go to GitHub source test file dot test and type something in. This is a test. Save it, and we can then go look inside of the Docker container. Oops, not that. This one, yeah. And cat test file dot test, and this is a test. And then we can remove test file dot test, and then we look over here, and it's gone. So these are a bind mount. They're the same directory inside of the container and on the local host. So that is how you can basically, don't save this, that is how you can edit the source code in this directory on your local machine using your whatever IDE or text editor you like, and then have it be directly reflected inside of the Docker container. So that's just a introduction 101 to the Docker container. Then when we want to exit, we just Control D, and we're out, just like you can close a terminal. So that's an intro to Docker and using Heat. If you want to see how to run Heat, go to the app image videos. But this just gives you some flexibility, and if you are a developer, you can download the Heat source code onto your computer. You can edit these paths accordingly, and then you can be working on developing Heat. And if you clone from the GitHub repo, create a new branch from the GitHub repo, you can then try to send it back up, and I'll try to approve it and do a pull request and all that, so we can try to get it merged into the main branch if you add some features. So anyways, that's how you use the Docker container for Heat.